if you're watching this, I would please ask if you could put on your I told you so hat, because this segment is going to get a little wild in the I told you so department. Do you remember a year ago when Joe Biden and the rest of the liberal media and the Democrats and everybody around the country said the Georgia voting laws are racist and they're suppressionist and they're trying to stop people from voting, black people in particular? Well, guess what? Voter turnout ended up being higher in Georgia in this particular time as it relates to last midterm cycle. So from 2018 to now, the two most comparable midterms, not only are they higher, but Georgia voter turnout is at triple the rate that it was in 2018. But wait a minute, the suppression of the vote. They're suppressing votes. Black people can't vote in Georgia because they can't get an ID. I would like to play a montage here of a couple different people. Again, didn't have a ton of time to put a ton of these together, but maybe we will over the weekend. But remember this when they were talking about the Georgia voting law way back when? Watch this.
You have long been a major voting rights advocate, but we are seeing a lot of new laws restricting voting, not just in Georgia, but across the country.
My issue isn't who gets legislation that restricts voting rights in Georgia.
I would strongly support them doing that. This is Jim Crow on steroids.
Feeling the pressure from black business leaders, activists, and boycott threats, Georgia businesses like Delta and Coca-Cola are now speaking out against the state's new voting law as well.
Let me be crystal clear and unequivocal. This legislation is unacceptable.
Do you see similarities between the voter suppression strategies happening right now in the South and throughout the country and the ones that we saw in the past?
Absolutely. I do see that. It seems to be Jim Crow on steroids.
And it's just not right. This is Jim Crow on steroids, what they're doing in Georgia and 40 other states. What it's all about. Imagine passing a law saying you cannot provide water or food for someone standing in a line to vote. Can't do that? Come on.
Oh, come on, man. This is from the Post-Millennial. Despite passing an election security law last year that critics claimed was voter suppression, and President Joe Biden comparing it to Jim Crow, which, holy cow, we'll touch on that again. We've talked about this. That's probably the worst thing I think a sitting president has ever said. We'll talk about that in just a quick second. Georgia has seen record-breaking turnout for early voting. According to data compiled by Georgia Votes, 540,000 people, it's not exactly 540,000, but we're rounding, people have cast ballots in the state as of Tuesday, far outpacing the 180,000 votes by the same point during the 2018 midterm primary elections. The number has even outstripped those of the 2020 presidential elections by about 156%, despite election officials at the time encouraging elderly and mail-in voters to decrease crowd size during the coronavirus pandemic. So not only did voter suppression, not only did people stop voting, the numbers tripled. Remember when the whole idea was we're suppressing the vote by passing simple and standard and straightforward and common sense voter security bills? Now it's tripled. I don't know. How do you feel about this? Let me know in the comment section. Maybe you'll go read some comments. Sometimes I can read comments. Sometimes I can't read comments. Lots of Let's Go Brandons. Let's go Brandon again. Wow, the more untoward Let's Go Brandon. Yeah, this was clear and easy to see. Now, so just to get back to this whole idea of like the whole Jim Crow on steroids nonsense, remember, Joe Biden called the new voting law, which required an ID to vote and didn't have places closing at 2 in the morning because nobody needs to vote at 2 in the morning. It got rid of 24-hour voting centers, which weren't necessary to begin with. It basically reverted back to previous election rules before the coronavirus. Remember, there was a big pandemic and a lot of things changed in 2020. Probably not legally, but we won't get into that. But just reverting back to normal practices, Joe Biden called it not only Jim Crow on steroids, where in the Jim Crow era, remember, black people were beaten in the streets for the awful sin of voting, which is terrible. One of the worst things the American people have ever done. Jim Crow was terrible, absolutely awful. So not only was it Jim Crow, it was Jim Crow on steroids, a heightened version of one of the worst times in American history. That's what showing an ID was to Joe Biden. And also that idea of, well, you can't give water to people in line. No, you can't give anything to anybody in line. There are water stations, and if you would like to get water to drink in line, you're more than welcome to do that. But obviously, you can't give anything to anybody in a voting place because electioneering is illegal everywhere and always has been. If you don't know what electioneering is, I can't give people water in line because what happens if I show up in my AOC t-shirt and start handing out water? Well, then somebody in a MAGA t-shirt is going to show up and start handing out soda. Then another person in a Bernie t-shirt is going to hand out sandwiches. And then a person in, a Ron DeSantis t-shirt is going to show up and pizza. And it doesn't end. You can't do that. It's not a workable system, and it would severely handicap voting overall in the United States. So that whole thing in and of itself is dumb. So there is that. The bill implemented an ID requirement for absentee voter requests and mandated 3 weeks of early voting, including availability on weekends. Jim Crow on steroids. It's the worst thing since lynching black people for voting in the South. Yeah, Joe, real good analogy there. James Clyburn echoed that in that other previous clip. But oh my goodness,